Zodiac Killer case? Was the Zodiac Killer cautious or reckless? December 20th, 1968, on a Friday night, the Zodiac Killer shot into the Ford Rambler at least once. David and Betty were frantic with fear for their lives. David fell onto the ground after exiting the front passenger side of the car. The Zodiac shot David in the back of the head. Betty ran, and the Zodiac ordered her to stop. Maybe he shot a round into the air. Then the Zodiac shot her 5 times in the back. Maybe he told Betty to turn away from him before he shot her. What's the distance Betty ran before stopping? Well, Betty was listed as 28 feet from the vehicle. The Zodiac Killer never touched Betty or David. There were very slight shoe prints in front of the Rambler leading to the passenger side. July 4th, 1969, a Friday night. While the city fireworks were going off, the Zodiac Killer was most likely preparing his handgun to go out that night. The Zodiac pulled his car behind Darlene's car and exited his car. After shooting Michael and Darlene multiple times, Zodiac walked back to his car and reloaded his handgun. Then he returned and shot them several more times. 40 minutes later, Zodiac called the police from a payphone and reported a double murder. The phone booth was about a 10-minute drive from the site of the shooting. Was the Zodiac Killer a former police officer? He pulled up right behind their vehicle at an angle. He shined his flashlight in their faces before shooting them. He obviously was trained with the use of handguns. He left the scene of the crime without leaving any clues. Or was the Zodiac Killer a former military police officer? 4 weeks after the July 4th murder, the Zodiac mailed a letter with a cipher to 3 different newspapers. The first part of the cipher went to the Vallejo newspaper. Then, after the Vallejo police chief requested more information from the Zodiac, he replied to the Vallejo newspaper 1 week later. September 27th, 1969, Saturday evening, the Zodiac Killer wearing a black hood walked up on Brian and Cecilia at Lake Berryessa. He told them some nonsense. Then he said that he needed to tie them up. After they were tied up, the Zodiac Killer stabbed Michael several times in the back. Then Zodiac stabbed Cecilia about twice as many times. The Zodiac Killer wrote on Brian's passenger car door the dates of the murders. About 1 hour later, he called the Napa Police Department from a payphone. October 11th, 1969, Saturday night, the Zodiac Killer caught a taxi near the theater district in San Francisco. The driver, Paul Stein, drove him to Washington and Maple. Then he moved forward to 1 block to Cherry. The Zodiac shot Paul in the back of the head. Then he got out and cut a piece of Paul's shirt off. 2 days later, the Zodiac mailed a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle with a scrap of Paul's shirt to prove he was the murderer. Was there any question now? May 6th, 2023. today. Well, we still don't know who the Zodiac Killer is. But after going over these crimes, it seems to me that the Zodiac Killer was reckless. He went out on Friday and Saturdays when there's many people out and about. And he did spend time preparing the murders with his weapons and the Zodiac costume and writing the letters and ciphers. But if you just look at the crimes, I say they were reckless. He could have easily been caught. What do you think?
Please subscribe to Nancy Drew channel, my channel.
Well, this ends this episode of Unsolved, and I'll see you next weekend with 2 new episodes, one on the JonBenet case and one on the Zodiac Killer case.